Good morning, everyone. This is Dino Nyambu, and this is Canary Compass. Welcome to the second episode of the Canary Compass podcast. The first episode was the acid test, which came out on Wednesday. It was supposed to be out on Tuesday, but Spotify does take its time indexing a new show. So going forward, Tuesday is the regular slot. If you have not caught it yet, it is available on Spotify and YouTube. Before we get into this week's reflection, I want to take a moment to explain how the podcast works, because the schedule has logic to it. Mondays, I typically publish a note or an essay on Canary Compass. The Tuesday podcast is a companion to that note. It is not an audio version of the note. It is a different way into the same territory. Same insight, different angle, different examples, things the written piece did not have room for. Fridays, I publish a reflection. The Saturday podcast, which is what you're listening to now, is a companion to that reflection. Same rule applies. Not an audio repeat version. A companion piece. And if a note or an essay lands on Wednesday, there will be a bonus episode on Thursday to go with it. That is the rhythm. Tuesday, Saturday, and sometimes Thursday. Now, this week's reflection. As we speak, my son is currently in Zambia. His report card came through last week, and I did what I think most parents do when the report arrives on a screen rather than in your hand, and you're not in the same country or the same room as the child. I went straight to the numbers. I opened it. I saw the Swahili marks sitting at about half of what the school expects. And before I had even scrolled to the next page, I had already sent a message to his mother saying he needs to pull up his socks. That was the whole conversation. Pull up his socks, fix the Swahili, get serious. And then maybe 10 minutes later, I scrolled to the teacher's comments. And the teacher was describing a completely different child from the one I had just diagnosed over WhatsApp. Focused, disciplined, a leader in group activities, strives for excellence. And I sat there looking at this screen, realizing that I had graded my own son on one number. And then I'd fired off a verdict to his mother and not even read the rest of the page before I did all of that. That moment really stayed with me for the rest of the week because I recognized it. Not from parenting, but from being on the receiving end of exactly that kind of reading when I was his age. Sitting in a school in Kenya where a Swahili teacher spent 4 years telling my mother that I was not a Swahili student. And my mom, who is Zambian, and in our house, we typically spoke English because my mom's Swahili wasn't that great. We normally communicated in the house in English. My mom, who had every reason to accept the teacher's verdict, she refused to accept it. She went out, bought me practice papers, put them in my room, and said, "Read these." I tell the full story of what happened with those papers in the written reflection, and I'm not going to spend time retelling it here because I really think you should read that reflection. But the part of that story I have not been able to stop thinking about is how fast the verdict came. 10 minutes. That is all it took me. I saw a number and I had a position, and the position felt responsible in the moment. It felt like good parenting. Until I read the comments and I realized I had done exactly what my Swahili teacher did to me. I read the mark and I called the child. There's a story about Thomas Edison that floats around the internet, and most of the version people share is not true. So let me tell you actually what happened, because the real version is better. Edison was about 7 years old, and he was struggling in a formal classroom in Michigan. His teacher, a reverend called Engel, told a school inspector that the boy was addled, which in the 1850s meant mentally deficient, so not capable of learning. Edison was not supposed to hear it, but he did. And he ran home crying and told his mother what the teacher had said about him. Now, Edison's mom, she was called Nancy. She marched back to the school the next day and told the reverend to his face that her son had more brains than he did. And then she pulled Edison out of the school and she taught him at home. She confronted the authority. She won the argument, at least from her perspective, and it worked. Edison became one of the greatest inventors in history, and years later he said his mother was the making of him. She was so true, so sure of me, and I felt I had someone to live for, someone I must not disappoint. Now, my mom didn't do any of that. So she didn't argue with the teacher. She didn't pull me out of school. She went to a hawker outside a bookshop, bought a stack of practice papers, put them in my room and said, "Read these." That was it. No speech, no argument, just material in my hands and those words. Both of them were right. Both of them refused the verdict. But the version I keep coming back to is the quiet one, because the quiet one is harder. It is easy to fight for your child when you're angry. It is much harder to say nothing to the teacher, go home and do the work yourself. And I keep asking myself, which side of that story am I on right now? Because I am not the boy anymore. I am the adult on the other side of the report card. And the first thing I did when I saw my son's marks was not what my mother did. The first thing I did was what the teacher did. I graded him in one color and sent the verdict before I had read the page. The written reflection goes further than parenting. It goes into how we read administrations, public figures, how grievance becomes a habit. And I stand by every word of that reflection because it's very personal to me. But the thing that landed hardest for me personally is that my mother's instinct was not to grade at all. She just asked, "What does Dean need?" And then she went and she got it. I don't know if I've learned that yet. Actually, I'm pretty sure I haven't learned it fully. I think I'm still closer to the 10-minute version. See the number, send the message. And this reflection is partly my way of being honest about that. Because the habit starts much closer than politics or journalism. It starts with a report card on a screen and a father who scrolled past the teacher's comments because the number had already told him everything he thought he needed to know. Except it had not. Well, that's it for today. The full note is available on canarycompass.com. This is Canary Compass, structure before sentiment.